Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm swell. Good evening, Bob. I hope you're doing great.
I am. Welcome everyone back to the SquadCast. I just got a text confirming that our guest will be here tonight. We will have Phillip Kennedy Johnson on the show tonight, uh, which is great because he is our first Pop Culture SquadCast live guest that we had last April. Well, no, last February. So it's been over a year since we've talked to him. A lot has happened. A lot of green things have happened to him since then.
Mm.
Um,
Of
and
course, it's St. Patrick's Day.
Well, there's that, which was fun.
Hmm.
Uh, so there's a bunch of good stuff going on. A lot of interesting things. One of the pieces of news, I'm gonna wait till we get Philip on because I'd like to see his opinion, and I think you might have heard that rumor that's kind of somewhat confirmed. We're gonna get to that. We'll tease that. Um,
You
I,
just did.
yeah, we're teasing.
That,
That's what we're doing. We're teasing.
that was a
Um,
good tease.
I I last week our good friend Ed Cato, who is going to be on the show in the next couple of weeks, I hope, uh, was in Austin, unfortunately, but okay. And that it's the one good reason to go to Austin because he was at South by Southwest, um, and he got a chance to be at the Marvel X-Men panel. Um, which was he got a bunch of great pictures and some great information. And if you go to popculturesquad.com, you can see that. But I just want to so this is one of them. This is Gail Simone is writing X-Men.
Yep.
One of the three books. We're very excited about it. I am at least. Well, I'm excited that Gail's doing it. Let's put it that way. And this
I'm
is
actually I'm actually in a tough position because I like all three of the teams that they've announced,
Mhm.
and I like the teams. They sound pretty good. But I really haven't read an X-Men book other than sort of a one-off here and there for decades.
Mhm.
Uh, life is just too short, and you have to cut some stuff out. And the X-Men was an easy thing to toss over. So
I've done that. I've done that a couple of times in the last decade, to be honest with you.
yeah,
And times before that. Um, I I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it's good. It's not good right now, and I apologize, for saying that. But I am there. There's a whole problem with what's going on in the continuity. That is the whole thing that they started 5 years ago it's spiraling the bowl. It's on its way down, and we're just watching, waiting for it to last go, and it'll fill back up, and we can start again because that's basically what's going on. I just am looking forward to it starting again, um, and hoping that it's better. It was really good, and I will tell anybody who asks, you know, um, to go and read the first, first two miniseries that started the Krakoan age. Really good stuff. Again, super great high concepts, well executed stories, and then they started paying too much attention to the flaws in their story and trying to fix them. That's a problem.
that has historically been Marvel's biggest problem, as far as I'm concerned, as a reader, is that they feel obliged to fix things that were quietly broken that you really don't necessarily need to fix. You can just sort of get past it. You can kind of evolve your way out of it. You don't necessarily have to do a fix because a fix isn't going to please anybody. The people who didn't like the stuff beforehand still don't like the stuff beforehand, and fixing it is just an empty promise.
Right. One of the things, and the issue that we're encountering, or that they encountered, is that they came up with this really cool idea, and I mean, we're at the end of it, but like the issue is they figured out a way to not loot for they figured out a way for mutants to be resurrected, essentially, using a bunch of mutant powers and some Cerebro database and stuff like that. You could basically have a save point and rebuild a person if they were no longer there, based on their most latest save point, which is really kind of a cool thing. But then the people started to question the morality of that, and they're like, well, maybe that's not a good problem. And then it became the central storyline when it was just a cool little side story, right? Like it was just a little, oh, we don't have to worry about that. We're good. We're even better than before because we will always be around. We don't have to worry about losing characters because we're going to keep these same characters, right? Like, and then people became obsessed with the fact that this was a moral question, and then it became the main topic when it wasn't intended to be. So that's my opinion.
The
That's
problem with raising a moral question, which I do all the time, including in comics, but the problem with raising a moral question is if your storyline is spread out against 1 billion comics
Mhm.
over a 5-year period, is that how long it's been? 5 years?
I'm pretty sure it's been around that long.
No, it sounds right. Sounds right. Feels right. You're just drowning it because it's all the way across all of this material, and if you're going to do something, the reader may not be at the right point in that story. So somewhere in one of the other books, you're going to screw it up for the reader.
Right. The other part of this is another part of storytelling that bothered me about it was that the X-Men, the oppressed group, basically turned their advantages into uber advantages and then became the superior and aloof and down-looking group. So they said, we will allow you Homo sapiens to stay here, but we're not going to work with you. We're going to separate ourselves from you. You can't come here. We'll give you stuff. You will trade with you, but we have our own spot. And it just felt very I don't know. It's got some social aspects and political aspects of what's going on right now in the world.
X-Men always did.
Oh,
yeah. It's one of the things I liked the most, even though those early X-Men stories, I'm talking about the first several years, really weren't very good.
No.
It was some of the more boring stuff that Marvel was producing at that moment in time. But the fact that the X-Men were just sort of there in order to illustrate how screwed up our society is with respect to bigotry and just out and out hatred of certain groups.
Right.
That was valid, and that is still valid today. I understand, I have no idea if this is true, that that an analogy has shifted a little bit more towards the gay communities, and that's fine. That's very timely.
Yeah.
And I have no problem with that. I think that that's terrific. My biggest problem with the X-Men is that we have the Marvel Universe, and it consists of 400,000 or 500,000 characters, and then we have the X-Men universe, and that consists of 4 or maybe 5,000, 100,000 characters. It's just overwhelming.
Right. We can go on and on about X-Men and the reason why even we're having this conversation, and that's the important part, is that they are compelling. Like the concept is compelling. The concept of being special and that specialness being somewhat of a burden, I think is a compelling storyline. The problem, with what you're talking about, and listen, there's a note on my board over here that says too many X-Men. So that's something that I'm well aware of. But I think part of that is that, and I was thinking about this recently, today, I think, is that there was this huge explosion of different characters in the 90s where the writers seemed to try to find the most esoteric ways to give someone a special power, like a power that if you use it once you die, or like there's an X-Men who, if you are not paying attention to him, he ceases to exist, right? Like, how's that a power? And it's like, who can come up with the weirdest thing, and it just became, instead of that, and I think that was part of the mutant explosion. Who could create the most characters? Who could create the most weird characters? And every once in a while, they try and trim that down, and then they explode out again. We cut it down to 198.
Weird. Yeah, and I hate doing that. So please forgive me. Please
198.
I can't believe I did
198 of them.
That's right. But weird is a seasoning. It's like salt. If you add too much salt, then you're not tasting the meal, you're tasting the salt. I'm a barbecue junkie. I use very little sauce if the meat is good because I want to taste the meat. Weird in comics is good as seasoning, not as everything. We're just going to pile as much weird on top of weird as humanly possible. Then it's not weird anymore. It's just, insane. You're playing pinball. You're not telling stories.
Yep. So we were at GalaxyCon last weekend, which was super fun. We at Pop Culture Squad, we do these SquadCasts and we ask guests questions. I went around the show and asked creators I picked a question of the day and I started asking them that. So we're going to keep doing that as we go to shows throughout the year and get like little glimpses of asking creators the questions that they're not on the show to get. We did some videos. They're on a couple of them I've already posted on our Instagram and TikTok channels, and we're going to keep doing that. It was a lot of fun. So please check that out. Have them. We can watch them later if we want to. Maybe we'll do that. One of the things that we kind of talked about, and I want to kind of bring this up just because we have the moments and stuff. It's Women's History Month, and I feel that it's important that we recognize that women have played an important role in comics, and that
from day one.
But it has often been ignored, and intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. And I'm hopeful that it is getting better. But one of the things I encountered this weekend was women creators don't necessarily want to talk about it today. They don't want to talk about the fact that they are women creators. They just want to be creators, and I think that's admirable.
Also, I suspect that they're just tired of that whole family of questions.
Sure, I respect that.
I respect that too. It's necessary because we have to tell people that there have been women actively involved in this business forever, and that comics are better now because we have a greater diversity of input. And also, by the way, if you attract more women into the medium, you're doubling your circulation and making comics thrive. So there's a good financial reason for discussing it. I totally get how people want to be respected for their work and not their gender or their religion or their color or whatever.
Of course,
it's their work.
Absolutely.
I totally get that. So it's a tough position. However, I strongly suspect that for most folks who feel that way, if they get into a tough position where some asshole comes up to them and says, what the hell do you know? You're just a girl or whatever. They'll respond dramatically, I hope.
Yeah. It was definitely. We have some video that we're gonna have on our socials, talking with a couple of creators who did talk about it, but some people said, I'd rather not, and I said, absolutely understand. I think that is a perfect position for someone to take, but by the same, and I'm not diminishing that response. I am saying that in the spirit of Trina Robbins, I would love to accentuate and celebrate the contributions that unheralded populations have made to this industry and continue to, and are able to do so in a much more celebrated way today.
Right. There is this attitude that it shouldn't matter, that it's the experience of reading the comic book, and this is true for other media as well. And we don't put a person's race or even confirm a person's gender, certainly not their sexual preference or any of that in the credits. It says writer writes,
right.
Artist arts. And
right.
And that really is what it should be all about. The problem is we live on Earth, and Earth is saddled with these attitudes, and some of these attitudes we have to learn from and get past. We have to learn how to correct and get past. So it's a tough balance. It's a very tough balance.
But even on just to follow on your point, there was a time when very, very explicitly women creators changed their name or went by names that were more androgynous so that they couldn't be identified. Intentionally, yes. Some have to be.
Silas Mariner.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I know, I get that, and it's terrible.
But even to the even Dale Messick. Dale can go as a male or female name.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Dale was a hoot too, but
she was writing and drawing a comic about a woman, But
also, her editor, who ran the syndicate, didn't like Brenda Starr. Now Patterson had a gut, probably the best gut in the history of comics in terms of what is good, what is bad, and how to make the good even better. But he didn't care for that one. I'm not sure who said, well, let's run it anyway, because his boss, who was his cousin, was so far to the right that he'd make Hitler look like Eldridge Cleaver. But she persevered, and she didn't really talk about that. At least, keeping in mind that it was the 70s when people started to get really, really interested in that sort of stuff, and and how those things happened. And, she was getting ready to retire. So I get that. I get that. And it's her right. I mean, look at Steve Ditko. Nobody is obligated to give interviews or to give their
Sure.
opinions or what. It's not an obligation.
You don't have to accept their awards.
Or their checks.
Right.
Although I can only think of one guy who doesn't do that. And a lot of people don't understand that about him or about Steve Ditko. But that's how they feel. That's their personal politic. It doesn't hurt anybody. It doesn't cause harm. It may cause confusion, but so does everything else on earth. So, they should have the right to back off, to not be in the public spotlight if they don't want to.
Okay, that's fair. Our guest is here, and so we're going to bring him in just a minute. But I want to talk to you for a second before we bring him in. Then we'll start him in on this conversation, and we'll get to a bunch of stuff. It appears that they have settled on a new James Bond. Have you seen that news?
No, I hadn't seen that. That's interesting.
I've seen it several places that Aaron Taylor Johnson has been offered the role. Do you know? Does that name immediately strike the person who he is to you?
Absolutely not.
He is.
However,
he's Quicksilver from the Avengers.
Right.
Movie.
That's right.
And he's Craven.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. Sean Connery, before he was cast as Bond, had only one American appearance. His first appearance on television, or in the movies, I believe, was in an episode of the Jack Benny program that they filmed in England. And he just had pretty much a walk-on. And nobody knew who the hell he was. Nobody. And then he became James Bond, and nobody knew who the hell he was. But they saw the movie.
Right.
And then they saw the sequel.
Right.
And then they saw the sequel to the sequel and lost their fucking minds. So any unknown actor who walks into an established part,
right.
I mean,
he's very well known among people, younger than me, especially, and therefore younger than you. But I think
true.
we're gonna put a pin in this conversation. We're gonna bring in our guest, and we'll come back to it and see what he has to say. Only because he might have some opinions. Anyway, so without further ado, Phillip Kennedy Johnson is going to join us. Hey, brother, how are you?
I'm great, Bob. Good to see you.
It's good to see you.
Hey, Philip, how's it going?
Mr. Gold, always a pleasure, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
As I was saying,
at my age, I still flinch at being called Mister. It's funny.
I think you should get used to it. You've done some pretty illustrious things, and I love your humanitarian work you've done. I love that. As much as involved as you've been in the comics industry, I love that it's such a small part and such a pretty amazing life from my view.
Well, thank you very much. That's very nice of you to say. And it really feels good when somebody can take that step backward and put my life into context, because I never have been able to do that myself. So thank you.
Well, of course, it's always a pleasure to see you. Bob, this is the tidiest I've ever seen your beard and mustache, I have to say. I look great.
yeah. Well, it's it's getting there. It's getting there. I trimmed it down like at the beginning of the year for the mustache, but it's coming back. It's coming in strong now. And
I like it. I like it.
I'm
If this was
also,
if this was your default, you could do a lot worse. That's good.
yeah, I'm gonna be I'm keeping the beard kind of. I'm not going crazy on the beard anymore. This is actually like a little long in how it's been, but
Well, it's good to see you too.
yeah. So it's been over a year since we've had you on the show. I know you've been
Oh,
super
wow.
busy. Well, you were our first guest on the first Pop Culture Squadcast Live. So now it's time for you to come back. I know you've been super busy. Is it positive business? Is it good stuff that you've been super busy? Yeah.
Yeah, it's all been great. It's all been great. I can't complain. Well, I mean, there's life stresses and all that, but like as far as the comics work and just work in the arts in general, it's all been very positive. Ton of stuff to do.
Good. When you were on, I might have known that Hulk was happening, but we couldn't talk about it.
Yeah, I think I just told you kind of under wraps, probably.
Yeah. We definitely couldn't talk about it. So that has happened. What for our listeners, what inspired this Hulk story? And to follow on that, I think their solicits are out for 12. Are we close to that? We're near there.
The solicits at least should be out for 12, if not.
And how long have you visioned this going?
Oh man, I feel like it's the way I set up the run. I wanted it to kind of echo the stories of my youth when, well, honestly, even the books I'm thinking of are actually old, even before I was born. But the books that I read in my youth of any of the big two stuff, where it was largely a lot of in and out kind of stories. It wasn't these long ongoing arcs. It was mostly like Monster of the Month, or maybe sometimes there'd be a two-parter.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that because I mean, my love of comics came from a relatively small stack of books. And it was rare for me to have consecutive issues. It was mostly old ripped up books that the stories didn't necessarily connect. And when I had a 2 or 3 parter, that was just like gold. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I get to read the whole thing. It's so exciting. But
right.
But most of the stories did not even continue. It was just like an adventure and you get in and out. And I really like that, man. And I kind of miss it. I hate that sometimes if there's a run I've been hearing about and I want to jump in, there's kind of this element of homework where you have to find the issues that led up to that one, or you just luck out and get on in the beginning of an arc.
It does happen.
Yeah. And I kind of wanted to try a new model where there is like an umbrella, like a larger arc happening going forward, but not every issue, like every issue drives the relationships forward between the characters. And there's reasons to be invested issue to issue to issue. But it's not necessarily the plot arc that's forcing you to come back. It's more like, you're seeing the relationships between the characters change and not jumping in and finding yourself lost because because you missed the events of the last 2 issues. I just wanted to be constant jumping on points. So because of that format, in theory, this could go on. I mean, as long as fans like it.
So I think you're definitely hitting it there. I will say that as I read this run, and I haven't read a whole lot of Hulk, a lot of it, a lot of times because of things like that. But as I read it, I feel like each issue is fresh. I don't need to remember what happened last time, and I think that's good. Like there's another comic that I hadn't been reading in a while, and I decided I'm going to start reading this again. And has some guy with pointy ears, and I just started read an issue, and I don't know where I am. I don't know, and it was the beginning of a new arc. And
oh, really?
He doesn't know where he is.
Well, yeah, that's true. I found that out. But no, you're really doing it. I really like it. And I want to let everybody know, please. We're getting some great comments in the questions.
Oh, good.
We're going to get to those. You guys are jumping the gun on some of our questions, so we're going to get to them. Please hang on for them. But where did this come from?
May I jump in for a second?
Yes, absolutely, please.
Quick second here. I think that people have a tendency to kind of overlook the importance the Hulk plays has played in the evolution of Marvel Comics. Because I think more so than any other character created since 1961, the Hulk was the linchpin for the Marvel Universe. He had his book, it had 6 issues, it was canceled. Because in the newsstand days, that's about when you found out that you were losing a lot of money. 6 issues, you're out. Okay. And then one day somebody decided over at Marvel, well, let's put them into a Fantastic Four story. Now, they had done that during that 6-issue run, but afterwards, about a year afterwards, they did this 2-parter, and 2-parters were unheard of in those days. So to sort of pad it out, the Fantastic Four and the Hulk picked up all of the Avengers. And we had a 2-part story, the likes of which we'd never seen in superhero comics before. And that's where all of that crossover energy and all that Marvel Universe energy really started to coalesce. So I've always respected the character. The fact that he's got a pedigree like nobody's business from day one to today is remarkable.
Yep.
We should just listen to you talk more, Mike. I always sincerely, I love hearing you talk about this stuff. I love the perspective you bring to it.
Wow.
Yeah, my view of it is honestly, I feel, because as I say, I've not been a lifelong reader the way that many people, that most people I know now have been. Mm-hmm. And like these people have these just legendary collections. And I feel like, when I got into music professionally, I left comics behind largely, not because I didn't still love them, just because it was for bandwidth. I wasn't reading for fun anymore. It was all about study. And when I got back into it, as like the art form had come so far, I was just completely entranced with what comics had become. And I was also finding books that I could have known even back when I was reading actively, but I didn't. When I was reading comics as a kid, I didn't know about Preacher. I didn't know about Watchmen. I knew about I knew about Big Two stuff. I knew about, Gladstone comics and, Gold Key and, like the cartoony stuff. I didn't know about the top shelf things being made. I didn't know about any kind of counterculture books that are coming out. So just getting back into it late in life and finding how much there was to learn, I still feel like I'm playing catch up all the time. As a case in point with that conversation,
I think you're a little, I want to, with Hulk. So my first experience with Hulk was probably the TV show. I was only 6 when it started or something like that. So I wasn't necessarily getting Incredible Hulk. And what I did once I became an avid comic reader, I did read Hulk. I read I started reading like just before the Switch, the great Hulk Alpha Flight Switch, which is I still think one of the coolest things that from a reader's perspective to see that happen was super cool. But I started reading a little bit, when Minola was drawing, and why did I lose his name? Anyway, when that happened, and then I read Byrne for a while, and it was fine. And I've read plenty of Hulk since then. This feels very much a way. I know we talked about this, off air, and you are totally channeling that vibe from the show and meshing it with the monster from the comics in just all the right ways. I think you're really hitting those things. That was something you definitely wanted to do. Is that fair?
For sure. Yes. I love the setup of the kind of the man on the run kind of thing, where he's wandering because of the danger that Hulk poses. He has no choice but to just wander. He can't have nice things. I don't know. It makes a lot of sense to me. And to me, there's more tension when it's when he has something to lose all the time, where it's not under control. you asked me where it comes from, and creatively, just as far as telling a story that I would want to buy or read, it comes from probably the biggest single influence on this run is, you mentioned Mignola. I would say Hellboy the Crooked Man is probably the biggest influence on this arc, or this run rather. I just like stylistically, I love the Southern Gothic horror feel. I love how that whole book just kind of looks like the South in kind of a, I don't know, just a creepy but beautiful kind of way. I love the elements of folklore to it, like witchcraft and folklore, and I don't know, it's just such a kick-ass book. That, like Hellboy in general, Hellblazer in general, I love that those characters kind of just wander through elements of folklore and American mythology and other mythologies and historical fiction, like creatures to which the rest of us are blind, because Hellboy is part of it. You know, right. He tries to be one of us, but he's one of them. You know, and that's why he's like this lightning rod for creatures that none of the rest of us see.
Well, one of the difficult things about dealing with the Hulk is that he is, in my opinion, is that he is a monster. I mean, he's a monster. Bruce may not be, but he is a monster. And he's a monster who lives and acts and works in a superhero universe where monsters are the bad guys. So how do you reconcile all of that? How do you keep him, the Hulk, being a monster, Banner being Banner, which is kind of confusing these days, which makes total sense, and still being able to run into Spider-Man? And you walk that line quite delicately, I think. And I think that the people who have done the Hulk best since the universe coalesced, which was 50 years ago, have managed to do the same thing. You have to approach it like man or monster. Answer is both.
Yeah, in this story, I mean, another big influence was the Immortal Hulk run, of course, by Al Ewing and Joe Bennett, and that was so. That was done so well. It tied into Hulk's origins so well. It kind of went back to the original stories where he was meant to be more of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing, or a Frankenstein thing. Before, as you say, before he kind of became part of the superhero crew. He really goes back to that, taps into even the original elements that have been left behind, like he comes out at night and that kind of stuff. That was really fun to see all that brought back. When I got offered the job to do it, the most difficult aspect, it was like, how do I not just ape Immortal Hulk? Because it was awesome. Like, that's what I want more of. Like, how do I not just copy that? I don't want to be the guy who just aped the other thing. And so the longer I thought about it and just kind of sat with it, the more I found myself gravitating towards the, away from the Cronenberg body horror stuff and more into folk horror, more into elements of mythology that I love so much. Those are the stories I really love seeing come to life in the Hellboy series and other similar books. So that's the direction I decided to go. To go back to Bob's original question about where it comes from, the underlying theme of it, though, of Hulk is because the Hulk can be, the beauty of Hulk is in its simplicity, is that it's an idea that any little kid can get and love and appreciate and get excited about. But it's like to make a music analogy, as I do often, it's like around midnight, where it's a pretty melody, but it's also got these chord structures that are thick, and like you can study that song your whole life and keep getting better at it and keep finding new things. Or you can just kind of let it wash over you like a pretty song, and Hulk is that way too. It's perfect in its simplicity and the complexity underneath if you choose to seek that out. Hulk can be a metaphor for anything you want it to be. It can represent, we've seen it represent obviously rage, but also child abuse. Also, well, the thing I wanted to make this about was substance abuse, kind of like just the element of like, what did I do last night? This thing that having an element, even calling it a substance abuse thing, is a little overly simplistic. It's kind of inspired by struggles of people I know very well, and it's more of a thing where it's kind of about the thing about ourselves that we hate and are scared of. Like you're a person who has goals for your life, things that you are trying to achieve. And there's this part of you that holds you back that is just waiting to come out. Whether it be, I feel like that's something most people can relate to, whether it be substance abuse, some kind of addiction, some kind of a pathetic tendency that you can't quite get under control, something about yourself that you try to defeat, but is always there watching you, but from behind your eyes. That's kind of what this book is about, where instead of, it kind of turns the concept of you wouldn't like me when I'm angry. It kind of dumps that whole cliche. And now he's not the big bruiser protector that comes out and fights your fights for you when somebody kicks you around. Instead, now, because of the events of the previous run, and because of the story I want to tell with it, it's more about the guy who, anytime he gets close to the thing that he's working for, or if he gets close to a moment's peace, if he finds a moment's peace to rest, or he makes a friend, or a woman likes him, or somebody shows him any kind of kindness, if he starts to find himself, if he lets himself kind of enjoy that moment's peace, he sees these green eyes in the shadows, and he has to run again, and then he blacks out, and when he wakes up, everything's broken, and sirens are going off, and somebody's dead, and he has to just run again. It's like this element of like, what did I do last night thing that I know a lot of substance abuse victims kind of have to deal with.
I think the difference, and it's an important difference, is that substance abusers are more likely to be concerned about what they've done to themselves, whereas the Hulk, by virtue of being the Hulk, is when he wakes up as Bruce, is more concerned about what he's done to the rest of humanity.
Yeah.
And that outward perspective allows you a platform for making a point, for educating, for taking the reader's internal traumas, which are the same as the non-reader's internal traumas, and commenting on them and exploring what you can do with them. The so-called monster genre has always been humanized to a certain extent. I mean, we understand where Godzilla is coming from. We get that. And quite frankly, it took Americans a little while to get that. But we get that. And it's a wonderful device for informing yourself about what the human condition is really about.
Yeah, I mean, the best horror movies they always have this some kind of a commentary underneath, right? It can't just be
Right.
about the scary thing. It needs to mean something for it to really matter, for people to care about the story they're watching. If it's just spectacle, who gives a shit? There needs to be something beneath that. So that's what it was. That's what it was for me. I feel like the Hulk ought to be scary. I want him to be I want him to be the scariest monster in the story, not just the thing that he's fighting. And I also introduced the Charlie character. This girl is kind of running with him now, because I wanted to see Hulk and Banner's relationships, not just with each other, because I mean, usually they're not even in the same panel together. Obviously, it's one or the other typically, but I wanted to see the relationship with somebody else, someone who has a different relationship with the two of them. I thought that would be really fun, because I've also known people who whose partner likes them best when they're giving into their worst impulses, right? Like sure. The addict is the one I fell in love with. Like, that's the one I have fun with, that kind of thing. So Charlie actually idolizes Hulk and thinks that Banner is pathetic and lame because she sees her own weakness in him, even though, Banner is by all accounts a genius. That's not what Charlie cares about. Charlie cares about how weak she is and how frustrated she's always been with her own weakness, her inability to take care of her brother. So she sees all that same weakness in the skinny nerd. And when she sees him become Hulk, that makes her makes her feel like she can do that too.
In life, nerds are annoying because they're smarter than the average bear. And monsters are interesting,
right?
And everybody's got some weaknesses inside of them that allows them to identify with different aspects of a monster personality.
Yeah.
So again, you have that opportunity. That's great.
Yeah. The girl, I'm sorry, Bob, you have something to say.
No, I want to hear what you have to say. I mean, I can listen. We can sit here and talk about this for 3 hours, and then we can get to something. Fine.
Well, I mean, Charlie, the character is, she's in the sticks of Kentucky, in a place that I know pretty well, and she, she grew up idolizing. I like the idea of somebody who thought her hero was somebody else. Like she has all this Cap stuff. Like we see her in the story. There's a flashback where we see her making her own Cap shield out of like a pizza box, and then she and her brother go playing with it. And she always thought that Cap was the man. Like Cap is because he's this biggest and strongest and fastest, and he's just he's handsome and he's just awesome. And that's who she wants to be. She wants to grow up and be like Bucky. She wants to be his sidekick. And she was just dreaming about getting out of there her whole life. And then somebody does come to get her out, not even on purpose. But when somebody comes, it's not Cap, it's the Hulk. And then that kind of realigns her whole thing. And now she finds this gigantic, and he's the strongest, most powerful thing she's ever seen. And she's just completely intoxicated with what he can do. And that becomes her new fantasy. She's been on the lookout for any kind of father figure or a big brother or somebody to help her the way she tried to protect her brother and failed. And, if Hawkeye had shown up, she'd be out there with a bow and arrow. If it was Doctor Strange, she'd be trying to make circles in the air. It happened to be Hulk that got her, and doesn't even want her there. He doesn't even want her to follow him, but she does anyway, because that's the thing that came to get her out. So whether or not he wants her there, like she becomes his shadow. I have a lot of affection for that character.
I can empathize with her. I do empathize with her plight, keeping in mind that the reaction that I think an ordinary person would have to Captain America is quite different than that they would have for the Hulk. Captain America is the flag. He's patriotism. He's America. I mean, it's in the name. He's these values that we're rapidly pissing away in real life.
Yeah,
that are still encompassed in him. Whereas the Hulk is a monster. And to watch that evolution from Star Spangled role model to monster, that's a head trip. I like that.
Yeah, thanks. There's something pretty cool coming for her. I hope fans. I will say I've been trying to give readers the constant jumping on points like we talked about. I am seeing a little. I find value in social media in that I kind of keep my finger on the pulse of what readers are looking for, and I mean, I try not to let the opinions kind of like steer me around, but I do like to keep my finger on the pulse. And I do think I've been surprised to see people do want to see a little more forward momentum on the plot. That's kind of like with the underlying thing with Eldest and the Mother of Horrors and all that. So
right.
They have been heard, and I am kind of moving forward with that. So starting in issue 11, the status quo is going to change quite a bit. And we're going to start to see a lot more forward momentum on the story with Mother of Horrors, because that story actually it fleshes out a lot of the mythology that's already well established.
That's been super fun.
The Marvel U. So there's some cool stuff coming, like things that we've seen described in like old issues of Silver Surfer and Thor that talk about Gaia and Set and the Demiurge and all that stuff. Like there's all that's going to get fleshed out more, and we're going to see how Mother of Horrors fits into all that.
That's very cool. I wanted to talk about the technical portion away from the story portion.
Sure.
This is your really first extended run on a foundational Marvel character, right? Like you've done some other things with Marvel, but like this is a Marvel foundational character. What's been the most surprising thing about that experience, and what has been the most rewarding, and are they the same?
Those are great questions. I'm gonna let you down here. The most surprising thing. I don't know. It's pretty much what I got to say. It's pretty much what I expected.
Okay,
as far as the I mean, there's a lot of
I mean, you have experience with working on a foundational character. With Superman, you had
thanks.
a lot of experience with that, and some of it was good, some of it was not great. There was a lot of, you had to deal with a lot of things with that, and you excelled and kept your head above all the frays and did a great job with that. So I guess you have that. So coming into this,
okay, so I mean, it is always interesting to find. So the population that is really emotionally invested in Superman are not the same readers typically that are that for Hulk or Green Lantern. I found Green Lantern uniquely frustrating in that everyone it's almost never does this happen, but every now and then you find somebody who is the biggest Green Lantern fan, but of a specific Lantern, and they regard every other Lantern as shit. And anytime they see a book that's not their guy or whoever, they get big mad about it.
I might feel the same way about Robins.
Yeah. Okay. Robin's another one. Yeah. So you get your favorite, and anytime you see Tim Drake or whoever, you get annoyed.
But I get the point.
It's been interesting. Keep them straight. All the different.
There's a lot. That's what happens when a character's popular. You make 10 more.
Yep.
So Green Lantern was kind of funny in that way. There's a similar. Sometimes I get questions from Hulk readers. Oh, thanks, Glenn. That's Glenn. Glenn's in here. That's so Seeking Superman. That guy that just wrote in. That's Glenn. He I wrote him. I named the construction worker in my last arc after Glenn, and the first and last issue of that last run. That's him.
Okay, I know him. I remember that character.
Yeah. Let's see. I digress. Sometimes fans will ask me questions like, which Hulk psyche is this one? And that's just not something I care about at all. Like I'm trying not to ask questions. I regard Hulk as like one Hulk. I know that's not the case. I know there's different psyches, but honestly, the tone of the Hulk psyche has changed depending on what the writer wanted to do with them, with them and Banner together. So it's all kind of a big excuse anyway. And I guess I haven't given it too much thought about which one is speaking. I think this one, my Hulk, my fractured son Hulk, as they're calling him, his voice is probably most similar to the World Breaker Hulk, I would say, that we saw in Planet Hulk, which was an awesome run. I just don't like the baby talk at all. I feel like it really takes away from his gravitas, and it's impossible to make a Hulk truly scary, to me at least, when you hear him say stuff like, me Hulk, be angry, blah, blah, blah. It's just hard to take him seriously when and you want him to be intimidating and scary. So I'm having him speak absolutely as little as possible.
Sure, you don't want him to be verbose.
Exactly. When he must speak, it is the fewest words possible and not the baby talk. That's all I'm really thinking about.
Yeah, actually, I appreciate that, because in the earlier days, the first couple of decades of the Hulk, he sounded like the way they wrote Super Baby back in the 60s.
Right.
And that pissed me off enormously, because I was a kid. I didn't talk like that. I didn't know any kids who talked like that.
Sure.
So now you're going to have the Hulk talk like that? Yeah, that was a little awkward. I agree.
Even the Hulk smash thing is just kind of, I don't know. It's not the vibe that we need for this particular run. He's supposed to be as scary as he's the monster.
In the movies.
Yeah, sure.
It works.
Exactly.
Nice in the movies.
Yeah, that's not a complaint for the movies at all. Just for what we're doing now. Ideally, he would never speak. But there are times when he needs to say something. He does have to have a relationship with Charlie, so that you do need a word on the page now and again. But as little as possible. I think the standard I'm trying to keep is like from issue, what was it, 3, I think, where Charlie falls into the mountain, like there's a cave in and she's falling and will certainly die. And then Hulk's trying to leave her behind, but then when she falls, he's like, oh my God, fine. And he jumps in, and as he's falling, he's like, stupid. Grabs her and he's like, stupid kid fell in a stupid hole. Mm-hmm. and that's
Yeah.
that's about as much as I want to hear him speak. And then later in the same issue, he's hardly said a word since then. And then when the Leviathan, when the Cthulhu thing comes at him, he's like, "Should have stayed in your stupid hole." And that's all the dialogue we need. They made me add a little bit at the very end so that we name drop Charlie, which is another thing that matters. I understand how comics work. You got to name drop the character. So
Right.
there's stuff like that. But if I can get away with 0 words in an issue, I will.
What would be fun is if in 1938 Superman had that same attitude towards Lois Lane. You fell out of a building again, and now I got to go rescue you. Great.
Yeah. Boy, has that come a long way.
I think that.
Yeah, I was not a Lois fan growing up, and because most of my books were extremely old, and
I think that's changed based on how you've written her, though.
Oh yeah, I mean now she's amazing, but back in the day, the way that they treated each other was pretty rough. I mean, like Lois was always kind of talking shit about Clark and just was not interested in Clark at all. Was really rude to him all the time. And then the big jock comes up and she's all like doe-eyed. And Superman was always gaslighting her and like playing tricks, kind of laughing into his fist about like, if only she knew, watch this, and kind of just playing little pranks on her all the time. I was like, damn, dude, this is not what I want. So now I feel like most writers really nail that tone now. And of course, Lois has become one of the most amazing female characters in comics and is in her way just as powerful as Superman. And I love that.
One of the best characters today over at DC, in my opinion.
For sure.
But originally, she was a cliche. She was the advice of a lovelorn writer who made good, not the Pulitzer Prize winner. And that shows you just how comics were created by a bunch of Neanderthals. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. I've been reading a lot of Silver Age stuff lately too. So it's taken a long time to get to where it is today.
I mean, yes. I got a really interesting question once about somebody if all of Superman's time hopping, like the fact that he's seen the future and the past and been all over, if that colors his views of justice. And I thought that was a fascinating question. I love that. And I don't think that he necessarily treats people today as, because he's seen the future, right? So he knows what if right now we're all just in the course of our normal lives, what if we're committing what will be a cardinal sin in the future? What if the concept of farming animals and eating meat is just considered just completely barbaric in a few hundred years, and we're all monsters? Would he come back here and judge all of us that way, like in the same lens as people with, however many centuries of perspective that we don't have? I feel like the answer would have to be no. But that kind of made me think of the way that the characters. Yeah, that kind of made me think of the characters themselves and how they've been portrayed. Because I mean, Superman, and originally he was definitely a champ, like the champion of the oppressed, as was coined in the first issue. But there were also times when he was kind of like the counter bully, like he would bully the bullies, and sometimes he was a real jerk about it.
We talked about that last week.
Yeah, really? I wrote a column a week. Was it the week before this? 2 weeks ago?
Yeah,
about the first Superman newspaper strip story, which was done in 1939. And I just reread them. And Superman was a terrorist. He would pick up guys that he decided were bad guys who had information and threaten to kill them in some of the worst, most horrific ways, and then would pick up the bad guy and fly him through the air and say, I'm going to toss you on these electric wires right now.
Right.
Unless you tell me where the supervillain is.
Exactly. Confess or I'll kill you.
I'll kill you. And
pretty common.
That's a different take on Superman than we're familiar with today.
Right.
The particular panel that we highlighted was that he was running into a building, and they're like, he can't be killed, and they're shooting at him, and he's like, well, it's a good thing that I can't say that about you.
Right.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's why I picked that down. My God. Yes. Okay, times change. We evolve, not necessarily in a positive way. And also, history tells us we tend to de-evolve as well. We tend to go back to some of that stuff. So,
we still have that. Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
If we have that thing in the future that you were talking about, like, let's say, more people decide that eating animals is a bad idea. Not friends of mine, but still people like that. That's fine. But somebody's not going to do that. And sooner or later, somebody's going to make terrific food out of some beast, and they're going to go buy it. Somebody else is going to go by and say, wow, that smells great. What is that? And he says, it's dinner, but first I have to help Superman kill this guy. No.
I want to. This has been such a great concept. There's a lot of things we can go with this, but I want to get on this. This was super. Oh, that's not the one. Where are we? Where did we go?
But that was
there. We go. That was a great compliment.
Yeah, thanks.
Green Lantern War Journal.
Thank you, Glenn.
So there's been a lot of Green Lantern stuff. A lot of people are saying this. There's some questions.
And Pluto's saying a lot of nice things here. Thanks, Pluto. Thanks to everyone for the kind words in here. It's always great.
There's a lot. Go read these comments because I don't want to embarrass you in here. But like, there's a question here. We're going to see Katma in War Journal. So
man.
You don't have to answer that. You don't have to answer any of these questions. However, I want to. John Stewart, I think, and we've talked, has been a character that's resonated with you before you began writing regularly. Is that fair?
Yeah.
What inspired you to tell the story that you're crafting in War Journal? And what can you tell people what they would be, what they're missing by not reading it, and where do you want to go with this, and why is this story important?
I'm trying to write a story that defines like kind of a one-stop shop for who John is as a fully realized, complex character. It's very often a lot of the takes that we've had of John have been in the context of a team, sometimes in the context of a team in an animated film or show. And when you're writing a team like that, especially if it's a big team like the Justice League, often you have to write them in kind of a shorthand. Mm-hmm. Like anytime the Flash has something to say, it's got to be fast and quippy and kind of meet that vibe. And Superman has to talk a certain way. The shorthand for John has often been the grizzled ex-Marine, and there's just so much more to him than that. So it was important to me. I mean, there may be fewer John Stewart diehard fans than there are diehard Batman fans or diehard Superman fans, but those fans of John Stewart need him to be awesome. Like he really matters to various populations, and they need somebody to make John just incredibly cool and interesting and complex and just feel real. So yeah, I felt a lot of weight writing Superman because Superman represents the best of what humanity is supposed to be potentially capable of. Writing Superman is like a philosophical statement on humanity, on the human condition. Writing John, I felt that weight again, but differently. I don't know. There are these details about him that really matter to me. I know a lot of people who come home from deployments, who are like combat deployments, who are, they're so used to seeing it dialed up to 11 all the time, where there's no something almost, I won't say unique, because there's been other battlegrounds like this in the past, but where there's just like nowhere is safe, where like you've got danger not just in 360 degrees, but like also above you and below you, and there's just danger could come from anywhere. There's all these like ambushes and things that could blow up at any moment. There's this constant just tension, and when they come home, trying to get them to dial it back down again is sometimes an impossible task. Imagine being a soldier or a Marine, like driving like every time you drive, you are going through a hostile area where anything can blow up at any moment. You're like where your adrenaline would be. People come home and they still drive that way. And if they're driving at a speed in which that adrenaline is not there, they drive faster until it is there. There's this a ton of people come back from combat deployments and die in car accidents or motorcycle accidents, or have these serious rage issues at home or with friends or whatever. I wanted to see John coming home from this insane hostile, this crazy war he was involved with in space, come home to take care of his ailing mother and trying to learn how to live life again, and having a hard time with it, trying not to be one of those guys that he knows that comes back broken. So that was one element of John that really mattered to me. Another element was to give him back his architect roots, because that's the John that I remember when I was a kid. I didn't have a whole lot of books with John in them, but the ones that did have him in there, I remember him as the architect, and the son of the civil rights leader who inspired him. I remember him as the guy that took off. I remember that Neil Adams panel where he takes off his mask. He's like, "I got nothing to hide," and he throws it away. Even then, that was like a big deal, because there was the superhero. There's all the little tropes that every superhero is kind of expected to have, including the, secret identity. So for him to throw his mask away, not even Superman did that back then. Like everybody had a secret identity, and for him to be like, "I am John Stewart, Green Lantern," was a really big deal. And it made all the sense. Like now, looking at it through, adult eyes, it makes a lot of sense to me that the son of a civil rights leader would have inherited this inherent mistrust of the masked vigilante. For him to be like, I'm going to do the right thing, and I'm going to show you my face while I'm doing it. I'm not afraid who knows who I am. I just think John's, like, in that way, I think John is the consummate superhero. And I wanted to see that sense of duty that is such a big part of him, and see that kind of tested between duty to his own hero, his ailing mother, and also his duty to the Corps and his duty to, justice in general. So
I think we see that attitude in a lot of returned veterans. I did a lot of work at a VA hospital, among many other places, as a drug counselor, drug abuse counselor. Because I'm so old,
you're awesome, man.
These were Vietnam veterans, and I'd go to the VA and we'd have like sort of a group thing. We'd talk about our experiences and the noble intentions of the military, which are not necessarily on display day by day because it's an overwhelming bureaucracy, but those intentions are to be found in many of these people, many of our returned warriors, if you will. I totally get John's attitude. Given his civil rights background and his military experiences, and those are sides we just generally don't see. Your point about, like drivers, guys who come back and drive like maniacs, that's very, very well taken. And for one of those don't try this at home moment things, let me recommend to everybody who may be listening, never to get into an airplane that is being piloted by a guy who just came back from war. Don't ever do it. You're going to lose your lunch.
Some of the things that you were kind of saying, and I was, so, my experience with John was first in the, when Joe Staten was drawing him, but Len Wein was originally writing it, and Steve Englehart took over in that range. And there's a lot has happened. Starlin had his chaotic experience with John, and a lot of things have happened. Then JLA came, and that changed him significantly because he became. There's a lot of dynamics into why John was in Justice League, the animated show, and that made a big impact on him. But I think what you're doing is is definitely bringing him back to that Len Wein, Sting of the Heart, Joe Staton drawing him character that was essentially as much as, and I'll put it this way, Hal didn't want anything to do with a bunch of lanterns on Earth. He was very much above them. Like, this is my Earth, and you're all here, and I got stuff to do. And Guy was, Guy's Guy. But John was kind of the leader of that group of lost lanterns that were all here on Earth, and had to do it he had to be the adult in the room. And that's the thing that I always liked about John, is that he is the one who is going to be very serious about what he's doing, and not be inconsiderate and not be inconsistent. He is going to think about what he's doing while he's doing it. He's brilliant and courageous, and all of the things that you're saying that you're getting from fans. And that's what I always liked about John. And I think that's definitely what you're bringing back to him.
No, thanks. I try. I really want him to be all about integrity and duty, and not just because, in fact, not at all because he got him from the military. Like he brought those things to his job as a Marine. He didn't pick him up there.
Right.
He got him from his mother.
Right.
And
I love that element that you're doing with her mom, with her in there.
Thank you.
I think really enjoying that.
Thank you. That's another element that I wanted to. It's just, it's good. It's good for us to see superheroes having to deal with problems they can't shoot at. Having to to deal with problems that we have to deal with. Like, what do you do? Like, my whole War World story with Superman came from my anti-human trafficking stuff. Like, how do you save people who don't want your help, who hate you, who don't think that they need you? And now John is faced with his mother's dementia. Like, how do you fix that? You got the power to do anything. The thing that he keeps coming back to and saying is, well, I gave him a couple of kind of catchphrases. One of them is, keep telling me what I can't do. I love that shit. Yep. That's something he's got that. He's kind of fighty, like he's aggressive a little bit.
And that's perfect, because that's from the origin, like the fact of, when Denny and Neil created him being a black character was revolutionary, and different, and there was attitude. He always had that.
Yeah, exactly. Even that moment where he's throwing down his mask, it's like aggressive, like, I don't need this. Like, there's always this aggression in there. One of those fans I mentioned earlier, where everyone has their lantern. There's a Hal guy out there. There's a Hal super fan who thinks that every other lantern is shouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. And I said something on one of these shows about how, like, sometimes somebody had asked me the difference between John and Superman. I talked about how John is a little more like chest bumpy, kind of like when somebody wants to fight, he's like, whatever, let's do this. And Superman's all about finding the other way, doing it with, he doesn't want to fight if he doesn't have to. John, there's this thing that we do in the military where if a couple of guys are about to fight, they'll rip their rank off and throw it on the ground. So if there's a master sergeant and a staff sergeant about to fight, they'll take the rank off. Like, I'm not going to hide behind this. Let's do this. And John, I could see John doing that. He's just kind of like, I'm not afraid of you. Let's roll. And it kind of reminds me of those old books that you're talking about. And the other guy, the Hal guy, was like, actually, John's very polite and blah, blah, blah. I would never do that anyway. Like, okay, guy, whatever you say.
As an aside to that, I was comics fandom was if there was one person responsible for it, and there wasn't, there were plenty. It's Dr. Jerry Bales. Most people probably heard the name. He died about 10 years ago. Wonderful, wonderful guy. Huge Golden Age comics fan, because he was even older than me. And he said that about Alan Scott.
Oh, okay, cool.
Alan Scott, why didn't they just bring back Alan Scott? That was the Green Lantern. That's who it was. Just do that. And he understood all the commercial reasons for that. And he also understood just how revolutionary it was to bring back Green Lantern and to do those first Hal Jordan stories. You can contrast that with Guy Gardner, who I should point out was my late wife's favorite character by far. Which
really,
yeah, that made for an interesting relationship. But no,
my understanding is Linda was a huge Green Lantern fan in general.
In general, and except for Kyle, and was specifically interested in Guy Gardner. She identified with Guy on some level or another.
Huh. I'd be curious to hear more about that when we have more time.
Yeah, really.
Sincerely, I really would.
Well, I'd be happy to discuss it. But that's very different for a superhero character, and it wouldn't work as well if he wasn't a contrasted version of Green Lantern, of who we think of as Green Lantern. He was almost in terms of attitude, the anti-Green Lantern. So you can kind of explore that realm of, I don't want to say madness, because it's not quite madness, but it is ego. So you can do good things with that. I criticize, as I did earlier with Robin, just how redundant so many of these characters are. We have 43,000 Spider-Men now, and women, and spiders, I think. But if you use it as an opportunity to explore different aspects of what does this power mean to a human being, you got some good stories ahead.
Yeah, agreed. I'm sorry, Bob. I fell off of a question you asked me. I was talking about the dementia stuff. Like the other catchphrase that John says in this book is, "A Green Lantern can do anything." And that's kind of his mantra. Before he got the ring, he was an architect who felt fettered by just the rules of three-dimensional space. Like his mind was always trying to do more than he could do under the rules of space-time, And then when he gets the ring, he has the power to do anything, and he is setting out to fix everything. He can make anything, he can fix anything, and now he's trying to apply that to his mother's suffering.
Right.
And so when he recreates his sister as a sentient construct, I know that in theory, at least it is generally thought of that when helping someone with dementia, when caring for them, it's best not to keep them in their fantasy land. You want to kind of keep them grounded, and often that means reminding them of painful things over and over. And John can't bring himself to do it. Like John just is,
it's
so
devastating.
Yeah. So he brings his sister back to life to take care of her and to let her have her fantasy. Like, she's dying anyway. What's the harm? So he uses his power to, in theory, kind of commit this sin towards his mother. It's out of love, of course.
Sure.
But there'll be consequences.
Sure.
It's not a sin in my book if you're making somebody you love feel better without causing additional harm.
Exactly.
It's just that simple.
I mean, this guy that somebody came up to me at a con, somebody who, like, their job is to care for people like that. And he's like, this is actually a mistake. I'm like, I know, bro, but that's what I would do.
Yeah.
I mean, 100%. Like, anyway.
I believe it. I thought about that, when as I was reading it, like, because I've had people in my family where we've been through that. And it's something that you kind of touched on as you were saying that, because when he got this power ring, he was no longer fettered by three-dimensional space. He could, or two-dimensional space, or whatever. He could come out. I think he's now bound by humanity and health and everything. So he's up against something that he cannot beat. He cannot beat death, and he cannot fix his mother. So he struggles with that, and I feel that you're putting that into the story. Like, you feel his, as much as you feel his pain and what he's trying to deal with, and I think that's It makes a good book. It makes.
I'm really glad. Thank you. Yeah, I really want people to love him, and you can't love him if you don't understand him, like understand
right.
their flaws and like the things that make them. I had this thing happen this is years ago. This is actually in part, this is kind of what inspired me to introduce the military elements of this story. I was at work for my Army gig, and I left real quick to grab lunch, and I was headed back. There's this like the drive-through thing just off post, and I was in there, and there's a little bank next to it, and somebody just tore ass into the bank driveway, like way too fast. I know what they were doing, but they were going the wrong way around it. And I was leaving I took note of it, but I just kind of kept going. I left the restaurant drive-through, and this dude was trying to pull away just to get around me and the other guy. And so he pulled out right in front of me with his car, and we almost hit each other. And all I did was jam on the brakes. I didn't try to, hedge him out or anything, but he was so mad about literally nothing that he got out of the car and came over to the car and was like screaming at me. And like it was crazy. He had a cell phone in his hand and just cussed me up and down. And eventually I got him calm, and he just laughed. I was looking at him stunned, like, what is happening right now? I've never seen anyone so mad over, like, nothing happened at all. And then he went back on the phone. He was like, yeah, Mama, I'm here.
The guy evidently was frightened out of his wits. And
he
shit when you're frightened out of your wits.
He was also in uniform. Like he and I were both in. I think it was back when the BDU was the battle dress uniform was still like the old forest green uniform, I think, and he was still in his too. And he just seemed very clearly to be that guy that I described, where he's just, had come back from a deployment and just trying to make everything intense like it used to be, like where they're just at a red light, just going out of their mind because everything's so boring now. I'll never forget that guy and how weird. I mean, nothing happened. No blows were thrown. There was no fender bender, nothing. It was just this guy. It was just so surreal. His reaction was so over the top. I wish I knew more about that guy's story and what made that happen. Because it was just so, I don't know. It was just so weird. I'll never forget him. I just wish I knew who he was. I wish I'd kept up with him. Can you give me your number? Call me when you've called him the fuck down. Because I would love to know more questions. Yeah, honestly, I would have loved to have known the story of what got him there.
You have a story that you've just stumbled across, not stumbled, but you've spent quite some time working on. That would work in reverse as well. You have this guy who's concerned about his mother, and he can't help his mother. All these powers, and they can't help my mother. The exact opposite works too, where a parent, mother, father, both, whatever, feels that way about their superhero son or daughter, and they don't want to see that child, who they still see as a child, I get that, taking all these risks and doing all this wacky, weird stuff. There's nothing they can do about it because this person has powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. The story works the other way as well. I'm not sure it would work in Green Lantern because you've done your story, but keep that in mind. I'm interested in seeing the opposite too.
Okay, I will keep that in mind.
We got to change topics. We're gonna change topics a little bit. We can come back to things if we have more time, but we need to.
Yeah, there's been a lot of questions. I'd love to answer some questions when there's time at the end.
Yeah, well, I'd like to come back to some of them are kind of interesting. A lot of them the answer is I don't know, but we will try and get back to some of them. So what makes someone turn to crime, especially in a modern pandemic riddled dystopia? Danny, a seemingly mundane young man lost in escapism with a spiraling lack of control over his life, witnesses something during a delivery job that will change him forever, turning things as dark as the black crocodile skin boots he can't take his eyes off of. In this thriller, the morally gray turns cold-blooded murder. So tell us about Crocodile Black.
Crocodile Black is my return to creator-owned comics.
I'm
really
very excited
about
for it. Very, very
Thank you. Me too. Thanks a lot. Me too. This was inspired by COVID. This is I was struck by how few books at the time were acknowledging the time that we were living in. Like everyone was kind of like nobody in the books was wearing a mask hardly. There was no acknowledgement of how the world had changed, and I don't know. It felt like a missed opportunity. And I know that COVID's over now. We beat it, so now it seems too late now. But no, that's a joke. Obviously, I know it's still out there. But I don't know. I was just surprised how scared everyone was of talking about it. In comics, yes, or for the most part in film also.
Mm-hmm. I have a theory about that.
Yeah,
because it pervaded our entire society, our entire culture. We kept on thinking and hoping that it would go away real fast.
Right.
And of course it didn't, and quite frankly still hasn't. But we were so obsessed with getting past COVID that we didn't want to talk about it. We wanted to get past it. Now, our friend Dean Haskell, who's a friend of the show,
I saw Dean in here. Yeah, hey Dean,
and a high society bon vivant, has a new comic out. I guess he's funding the second issue called COVID Cop. And
that's cool.
No, yeah, it is. And you'd think like it's 2024. We don't want to hear about COVID. We didn't want to hear about COVID when we were stuck at home. We don't want to hear about it now. And I'm thinking, damn straight, let's do COVID Cop. This is the time for it. So we have to look back and discuss and think about our experiences, our common experiences, and that supersedes any sort of heroic fantasy. So I'm looking forward to seeing how you approached that problem, that difficulty.
I want people to know that it's coming from Boom Studios, and issue 1 comes out on May 8th.
Yep. FOC final order cutoff is April 15th. So getting your pre-orders. So the idea in this story is that it follows this guy who's just like a mid-20s kid with no prospects to speak of, who's kind of sheltering in place with his parents. His dad he hates, and his sister's there too, and he's back in his childhood bedroom, and he just hates it there. And his dad hates him being there, and he's got no future, and he's just delivering groceries off of an app and just kind of marking time, just kind of holding in place. And he delivers these groceries to a guy's house and finds him dead in his armchair. And the dead guy is wearing this pair of black crocodile skin boots he just can't take his eyes off of. And he leaves and doesn't do anything. And he's got this secret that no one else knows about. No one else knows that guy's dead. No one else lived there, apparently. He just goes home and he holds on to this secret. And as he's listening to his dad dress him down like he's done for the 1,000th time, he finally is just like, man, what the fuck am I doing here? And he just gets up and walks out and walks back to that guy's house and squats there. And over time, he puts on the guy's boots and wears them. And now they're his boots. And he takes the old guy's identity. He kind of slowly settles into the guy's life and goes through his old journals and pictures and all the stuff in his house, and becomes obsessed with who the old guy was. And over time kind of makes up this kind of fantasy about what an awesome, dangerous person he must have been, and basically uses that COVID time to kind of reinvent himself as the person he's always wanted to be, which was a dangerous man. So Crocodile Black.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you. I'm very proud of it. It's
is this a smaller length story? Is there something that you
for now it's a 5-parter. There is potential to do more if people want more, but it's a 5. It's like what I consider movie length.
That's not your, like, you can do that, but there's a lot, especially in creator and stuff, where there's a lot lot of length in what you think and what you plan out. So I find that to be interesting. I'm looking forward to you putting something tight together.
Thank you. I'm really excited about it. I was really struck during COVID, like, and obviously, as we've said, it's still happening, but like when it was all the rage, you know, when that was like the only thing anyone was thinking about, I was struck by how many people were walking away from their entry level gigs and like the job they hate or the college degree they never believed in, and just said screw it and walked away and just did and pursued the thing they've always kind of wanted to do, because you know no one knew how long we were going to live or if the world was ever going to get back to normal, and suddenly you couldn't find anybody to to man the fryer at McDonald's. You know, like it's all these jobs, like all these places could not hire people. Like they were bumping up wages, trying to get anybody to work because people were just pursuing their own stuff now. You know, and I was really struck by that whole movement.
One of the things that really amused me about COVID, the lighter side of COVID, all of these employers were saying, "Oh no, we can't pay people a decent wage. We'll go out of business, and then everybody will be fired." And then COVID comes, and the workforce shrinks, and a lot of people with that level of job says, "Screw this! I'm not going to risk COVID for flipping burgers," you know. And so, but they still needed people to flip burgers, so they raised the salaries.
Right.
Oh, wait a minute! I thought that was going to put you guys out of business.
Right.
Well,
it's interesting, and I'm glad you're doing this. I applaud it because, you know, it's something that we all lived through, and it affected at least American society in ways that are profound and permanent to some degree. You know, there were, you know, it is on the level of what happened, you know, in the reaction to, you know, the 9/11 attacks. That was something that changed American psyche for a long time. The Depression, the wars that have occurred, those changed things. This was that. It was a psyche changing event, and it will be, you know, you may be one of the first, but you will not be the last. There will be plenty of people who will start to explore that time frame of what happened. So, you know, having it fresh is interesting to take that way.
Thanks. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike. Mr. Gold.
I was nodding in agreement with Bob. I said, yes, that's
okay. Sorry. Thanks. Yeah, even now it feels like a period piece almost. Because you don't really see a lot of masks anymore. People are more comfortable. It's almost like the Japan scene where people will, you know, just casually wear a mask if they're not feeling well or if they're somehow impaired. But you're not seeing them all over the place. And it's, you know, see, even now it feels like a period piece to me. The one story that I remember acknowledging it that I read at the time off the shelf was an anthology issue of Ice Cream Man. And there was a short story in that issue in which a girl that felt very much of the moment. That one felt like they were showing what we were living. There was this little girl just looking out her window out of her, you know, she's in the city or a city, looking out of her, you know, apartment and looking down on the street and imagining what people on the street are saying or what's happening. And she would like draw things on the window over people or around people or near them and like make little stories visually with what she's seeing outside, just like escaping behind her. Like we hear her parents arguing in the background, but what we're seeing is whatever's happening on the street. And then she'll change things according to what she's drawing. That was a brilliantly told story. I don't think it was even the usual creative team that did that particular short. I can't remember who did it. I'll have to go back and find it, but that was very clever and very well done. So I do kind of wish we were doing this book while we were still kind of in it, but but now it feels like a period piece and still very much worth telling. And there's a lot to say in it. There's a lot to say about that whole. It's an exploration of what people were doing then, just giving up the lives they didn't want, trading them in for the one that they really did want. There's also about the power of masks. You know, how some people thrive in masks. Some people, there's a certain kind of person that was relieved to be able to wear a mask and have that distance between them and the people around them. There's stuff in there about this particular guy's trauma and how it comes out again, how the boots brings it out of him in a way that even he doesn't understand, that we don't find out until just about the last issue. We'll see what the boots are really about and why it matters.
Tell us about Somnath Powell.
Somnath Powell. Yeah, he collaborated a little bit with Ram V a long time ago. Ram is a dear friend of mine, and I think I found Som before Ram and I spoke about him. I was following him on social media. And then at some point I asked Ram about him. I was like, tell me about Som. And he's like, brilliant. Like he hasn't done, they never finished a thing together that we would have seen in the West, but brilliant illustrator, also some experience as a filmmaker. I'm really excited for people to see what he's doing. His big gift as an illustrator is, if you see the kind of sketches that he puts online, you'll see what I mean immediately. This thing that kind of pervades most of his work is the intrusion of the grotesque upon reality. Like, so you'll see somebody, there's an image. I think the guy's driving. He's like driving. And he's smoking, but the smoke and his face becomes this other thing. Or you'll see a man and a woman kissing, and there's all this grotesquerie kind of happening. So there's this thing that he does where something is intruding on the real world, and that is exactly what we needed for this particular story. And I love Som's I love his default way in which he draws, the fluidity and dynamism of the actual real life stuff, but also the way that those things intrude is so striking. And I wanted that striking feel to this book.
That's awesome. Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
What was it like for you not writing other people's characters after, the last 5-6 years?
Oh, you mean like to have a story where the characters are all mine?
Yeah, they're yours. Yeah.
Man, I'm still taking bits and pieces of real people that I know and putting them in there. Like, and that's not even on purpose.
Okay.
There are. It kind of reminds me of this. I think I heard I think this might have been on a panel. There's a panel with Brubaker, Greg Rucka, and one other similar like crime person. I can't remember who else was on that panel, but man, it was great. And I'm also embarrassed to say I can't remember which one of them said that. I can't remember if it was Brubaker or I think Brubaker said this. Somebody asked, should I draw from my personal experiences when I'm writing? Because it's basically how directly should I apply the write what you know thing? Like, should I draw from my own personal experiences and my stories? And they said, no, because you will anyway. Like, even if you don't, even if you don't consciously try to, that'll happen. It'll be less heavy-handed. They didn't say that last part, but that's what they meant, I think. Sure. Like, you can't avoid that. You can't avoid taking from your own personal experiences. Like, the things that you care about will find their way into the story anyway, if you just let it, and I find that happening here. There's a lot of my own, there's, the main character is fundamentally broken as a human being. So I'm gonna not tell you like people that I drew from for it, but I say there's aspects of me and like several of the characters, but also of people that I care about very much. There's the main character Danny has a sister that is basically somebody that I know whole cloth, just put in a different context. But
by this, I guess I completely recognize that. I think what I was trying to get at, and I don't mean to take this, but like the fact that you have built all the rules, like these are your rules. These aren't somebody else's rules that you have to play within for this story. To go back to that, when you were building all the rules in Last God, right?
Yeah.
Is that are you enjoying being back in that thing? Do you find it?
Yeah.
Did you find it? Do you find it more challenging than you used to find it?
No, honestly, I don't feel it doesn't feel that different.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to describe it. Some people will talk a lot about how different it is to write licensed stuff versus their own things. I've not found that to be the case. I try to bring my best work no matter what I'm doing. You just have to find a reason to give a shit about the licensed stuff. Like, what's the story that you're telling that matters underneath it all? Just because you're telling a story with superheroes or, super spies or cartoon characters doesn't mean you can't care about it and tell a story that matters to you. You just have to find the thing that matters. When I wrote the James Bond story, 007 and then 007 for King and Country, that's about patriotism and what it means now, what it means to me now, how the concept of patriotism has changed and what it means as someone who's been in it for a while. And if you feel your patriotism starting to wane, or if you see other people abusing the concept, how does that affect your own faith?
That would be a fascinating conversation to have with you.
Yeah, let's do it.
We have to do that.
I have a lot of thoughts. Let's next time you're at a con that I'm at. Are you guys going to Terrificon?
I'm not. Bob is.
Okay.
I will be there. Yeah, I saw you were going to be there. We will see.
Yeah. Great. I'll be there. I should be at Baltimore and or New York.
Well,
so Mike
will be at Baltimore, so we'll definitely plan something for that.
Yeah, please let me buy a drink or a meal. We'll talk.
I'm also willing to come down. I live in Connecticut, to come down to New York for a nice meal.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I use a cane and stuff, so I can't go to really huge conventions in small venues like the Javits Center.
Yeah,
and I'm really annoyed that the Javits Center is the best they can do for a city like Manhattan. But, I go in for food, which tells you a lot about me.
If you ever get down to the Baltimore, DC, Annapolis area, come down. I'll put you up.
Absolutely, that's very nice.
I'm sure you've had your chances already before now, Bob.
I will do that.
Yeah, great. I'd love to talk to you.
It's a fascinating conversation that everybody who's listening and watching us right now won't be party to.
I wrote a poem at the very end of 007 that kind of sums up the whole thing. And I made up a character who Bond calls a warrior poet. Like it's this 00 who kind of showed him the ropes. The Bond girl in that one is actually a little bit older than Bond rather than younger. And she's the one who she was the true believer, the true believer in King and Country, or Queen and Country back then. And he drew a lot of inspiration from that. And at the end, we kind of see this thing about like it's almost like his lament for England, or his lament for his own belief, for his own faith. That kind of sums up the whole book.
Well, Bond is arguably one of the most patriotic characters in popular culture, and has been since the 50s.
Yeah, he talks so nihilistically, though. You wouldn't know it, but when the chips are down, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He's for England for sure. But I don't know. This felt like the time for a story like that,
Cool.
So since we've brought this up, what's your opinion on if Aaron Taylor Johnson gets the role?
Oh, I honestly, I kind of don't have a dog in the fight on it. I've heard a lot of stories, a lot of different takes on it that I think would be great. Back when they were talking about Idris Elba, I think he would have been amazing. I do think he's probably a little long in the tooth. I know they're trying to get somebody that they can get a ton of movies out of, and I understand that he's probably a little old for that, but he's dope though. He would have been great. Henry Cavill, he's a good looking dude, but that aside, I don't know if that would have been my choice. There's something about him, man. I don't know. God damn! I shouldn't even. I've said too much. I'm gonna get lit up.
We're gonna. So apparently, from what we've heard, in the last couple of days, that has been offered to Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Yeah, I heard that today too. I think that's a great choice.
Yeah.
And you've kind of seen Aaron Taylor Johnson on that trajectory since he first came onto the scene. I mean, he's been when you see somebody like weirdly good looking who's in some movies, does a really awesome job, but he's kind of skinny. And then you see him gradually beef up more and more going forward. You're kind of like, okay, this guy wants Superman, or he wants Marvel, or he wants James Bond. You know, you can kind of see, you can see their ambition grow with their deltoids. You know,
I had the pleasure, and it was really a pleasure, of seeing that happen with Christopher Reeve. When he first got the job, he was in terrific shape. And by the time I saw him dangling from wires over 59th Street in Manhattan all night, he was really pumped up.
Yeah, and when he got the job.
Charlie, yes, oh yeah.
When he signed the contract, he was pretty lean, right? Like real lean.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then by the time he was in his second, third, fourth movie, he was getting more jacked for sure.
By the time he was in his first movie, or his first Superman movie, he was
exactly. Yeah, he'd thickened up quite a bit.
Yeah, it was really interesting. It's like talk about the Hulk. Wow,
I love hearing him. Yeah, and he's a big, like he was a tall guy too. So when he's putting on,
he's very tall.
Yeah, so when he's putting on, he must have put on quite a bit of like actual weight for it to be spread that way.
Yes, and he's also one of the nicest people I'd ever worked with.
Man, I love his interviews. Yeah. Like I dearly wish I'd met him. Like I'm such an admirer of his work, but of him as a human being, I don't know. It's going to be harder. I have a handful of photos on my desktop that I look at every day that remind me of various things that are important to me, and him as Superman is one of them.
All right, let me tell you a small story. I know we're running.
I was waiting for this. Go ahead.
And Bob has questions, but
no, go ahead.
Marty Pasco and I spent 2 days talking with Christopher about who Superman is, who Kal-El is, who Clark Kent is, which are 3 different characters, really, 3 different personalities, because he grew up never having read the comic, never having read the newspaper strip, never having seen the television show, which means he grew up on Krypton. And to see that sort of innocence that an actor will show you when he's learning a part, oh, what a fascinating experience. I've had some background in that. Marty Pasco was a film writer and director and stage, so he had even more experience. And seeing him evolve into the part of Clark Kent was just as fascinating as seeing him physically evolve into the part of Superman.
Yeah, I'm such an admirer of that guy. I lost him too soon for sure.
Yeah, that's very sad. But he was able to get that Smallville stuff in, and you know, that just brought a tear to my eye. That was perfect. That was perfect.
I want to. So we have a chock full of questions in chat, and I'm going to try and narrow them down and kind of collect a little bit. So one of the things that people are asking, and people are very interested in, multiple people, are what comes next for you? Are there any other things going on at either Marvel or DC that you are working on? Could hint at, give us any sort of ideas, things that you. Let's do that one. What's coming next for you at Marvel and DC? That you can say.
Man,
I want to hear about the stuff you can't say.
Well, I do too, but we can't do that on air.
Come hang out with me in Maryland, and we'll talk, and we'll get into all that.
Yeah.
I definitely cannot say what the next thing is at DC. It's actually not releasing for a bit.
But there is something
there is. I'm doing a thing at DC. It's going to be pretty huge. I'm really, really excited about it.
Okay.
So yeah, I cannot wait.
Sorry,
for that
guys,
to happen.
I can't give you any more than that.
Yeah, you're going to love it though, and it's not coming out for a while. So if you know there's a book coming, and you're wondering if I'm on that book, it's not that, because it's not coming out for a bit. But I promise it'll be worth it. And especially for people who like my Superman work, man, just hang in there. My hope is that when I'm washed up and all my DC work is done, there's going to be so many threads that connect this book to that book to this other book, and this is kind of the keystone to all that stuff. So I can't wait for
on
you to
that
see.
note, you want to answer this one?
So if anyone's listening, I'll read it out loud. Hey, PKJ, I noticed a familiar name in today's GLWJ issue with one Byla Volk sharing a first name with Byla Esch, the Philosian storyteller from your Warworld saga. What's their connection? Oh, no. Awesome.
How good.
Well, there it is. So that issue dropped today, right? Number 7?
Yeah, apparently.
Awesome. Good. Well, you've seen Byla Esch. And Byla Volk is seemingly, they look similar, right? They're basically the same person. And we got the name drop of Olgren in the previous issue. So
somebody else asked about that in the chat too.
Oh, good. Yeah. So I have this sprawling epic that I want to tell that involves the gods of the first world. The first iteration of the Kirbyverse.
There are people who are. There's another question about that in the chat. So all these
good.
Everybody's paying attention to you.
Yeah, great. I'm glad. So as soon as they see Olgren's name, and now you see Byla as well, seemingly a different iteration of Byla. In the Warworld saga, we found out that Warworld is itself. It's not just a big ball with guns sticking out of it. It's not just a big space station. No. There's a planet underneath there. And the whole thing is a puzzle box with, at its center, the spark of Olgren, one of 7 aspects of a god who was, killed by the other gods in the first world. We couldn't be killed, so he was separated into 7 aspects. Each one of these things was like a different element of creation, So we saw one of those in the Warworld saga, Spark of Olgren. So now we hear Olgren's name again, and we see another Byla here. And in the Warworld saga, Byla was a guardian of the spark of Olgren. So, I mean, connect the dots, and that might lead you to believe there might be another aspect of Olgren in the story. So
very interesting.
There it is.
Very interesting.
I'm pretty excited.
People are getting it.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a spoiler because it's already there on the page. So
yeah, we can talk about that. Another themed question. There's a bunch of them in here. Is there a book at Marvel that you really want to work on that you haven't yet?
They just greenlit it, and that's another one I can't. That's another one that I can't talk about. But
if you had asked this question, if we'd asked you this question like 2 days ago, you could have said something, and then we wouldn't have been greenlit. But okay, so there's
Bob. You're asking a question you know the answer to.
I didn't.
No. It's so I have not confirmed this to Bob yet, but okay. But it's gonna be dope as hell. I can't wait to do it. This is not like a Hulk situation where it's a previously established book. This is a book that I wanted to tell, a story that involves various Marvel characters. So you're gonna love it. It matters to me deeply.
Royal Roy. The Marvel character nobody remembers.
Me neither.
Is he like that X-Men character I was saying that if you're not looking at him, he ceases to exist?
Yeah.
So yeah, you're gonna love it. But another book that I would love to do, and I saw this question from somebody. I want to write Wolverine, man. I think I would write a badass Wolverine. And I'd say who would draw a really great Wolverine is Nick Klein. give Nick and me a Wolverine book. Not yet though, because we have a lot of work to do on Hulk, and I don't want to lose. I'm not giving up Nick for anything.
But they're launching a new Wolverine book.
I know. This one's not me. I'm sure it'll be. I'm sure it'll be great too.
What I want to know is we launch still another new Wolverine book.
Yeah, new number 1. Got to collect it.
And every 8 weeks, you'll have plenty of opportunity.
Exactly. No,
what everybody wants
someday
to know,
I would love to write Wolverine.
What everybody wants to know is Tom Brevoort's number in your phone?
Is that really a question?
No. But there's a lot of X-Men questions in here.
Oh, okay.
Would you be interested in doing X-Force or X-Factor? And
God, someday I'll be able to talk about this. But I didn't get. I mean, offered is probably too strong of a word, but I had a chance to write an X book very recently, and I don't want to say which one, but
that's fine.
I would have loved to have done it. I was just stretched too thin, and I think I would have been frustrating to work with given the workload. But I would have loved to have done it, and I do have a take that I would love to do. So yeah, if the question is would I like to, then yeah, I would like to. It's just a matter of what do I have time to do and not suck on,
Forget Me Not is the name of the X-Men that I was talking about.
Oh,
they're probably dead. Well, they're dead. They're not dead. They can be regenerated. We had a whole X-Men discussion before you came in, so we'll leave that.
I would love to do X-Men stuff. I grew up in the time when X-Men was like the book, and everyone had. If you weren't reading X-Men, you're just trash. Like when I was a kid, you just had to read X-Men. It was the thing. Back in like the Joe Mad, Jim Lee kind of days. And I still have a lot of affection for those characters. I don't love every character. I don't love every book, but sometimes they really nail it. And I would love to do my own version of an X-Men book. And I have my team I would like to do as well. And that was actually the team that I got offered, which kind of stung to say no to. I just, the nightmare scenario will be to say yes and then face plant on it,
Sure.
So,
I mean, it's important. And I know you take it very seriously. And for people who don't know you, the way you approach a book and the seriousness that you approach trying to tell a story that's both interesting but also being respectful of the reader is a very important line that you juggle, and you do it well. And I know it's very important to you, so I can understand you saying, hey, I'd love to, but if I do it, I don't know that something else is going to fall, and that's not fair to anybody.
Or that one.
I deeply respect your ability to turn down something you really want because for whatever reason you can't handle it. That is against the freelancer code, but I will not rat you out.
Oh, thanks. I put myself in a position kind of recently where I was doing 5 books at once and also with my day job and trying to not be a shit dad. And it was just too much. I will not put myself there again. So that was a lesson that I need to remember and not be back there. I really like this job, but I don't want to, we also have, people literally kill themselves doing this job because of the time sensitivity and the stress and everything. And, I have other stuff I want to do. My goal, you've got a life that you've done a lot of really cool stuff, and comics is just a part of it. And, I just need to, I had to kind of step back and take a look at the bigger picture and not put myself in the ground for one extra book.
I'll tell you a secret, one that you already know. All that other stuff that I've done, and to me, it's all been one thing, but that's because I lived it. All that stuff, it makes you better at everything else that you do.
I found that too with creative things. Sorry, please continue.
No, you're absolutely right, and you summed it up much better than I would, because I would spend 3 times as many words. But it's really true. It's not just comics. That was the way I was going to first phrase it. It's everything. You need experience. You need to get out there and do the stuff that your brain says, let's try that. Now, don't be Wile E. Coyote. Look down. But, give it a shot.
Yeah, I found that getting invested in different creative pursuits makes me better at the others as well, in ways I can't even really explain. Just like watching Breaking Bad and really paying attention makes me a better composer for some reason. I'm not sure why that is. Or writing comics makes me a better jazz improviser, and playing chess makes me a better jiu-jitsu player. it's been really interesting. I came to comics from music, and I'm really grateful for that. I feel like it's made me a better collaborator.
Well, you and I share that in a sense. I grew up with a sister 7 years older than me, and she therefore was stuck having to babysit me. So from a very early age, like pre-2, she would read me her comic books when she was babysitting me. Now, given the time, she also was an early adapter to rock and roll. This was before there were 24-hour rock and roll stations. It's also in Chicago, so we did have a good blues station. And for me, music and comics are synonymous with my experiences.
I'm sorry, I lost you for just a second. What was that last bit you said, Mike?
Music and comics are integral parts.
Yeah,
building me.
Oh, that's cool. I'm about to be a guest artist at a comics and jazz festival next year in Cleveland.
No shit.
That sounds
Yeah.
cool. Comics and jazz.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
So I'm gonna
where?
Cleveland.
Well,
you can get to Cleveland.
Man, Cleveland's a cool town. But
I
agree. The people who set up the Superman's Cleveland event that they did this past year, they brought me in, and it was like a different person every week or two for a couple of months. It was me, Mark Wade came, Cena Grace came. Damn, and there's this other woman whose name is escaping me, and I'm a terrible person. I don't know her. I don't know her personally. I forget who they brought. But there was 4 of us, and I think, and we all did signings at this great shop, and we all did lectures and did a thing at the library. That epic Cleveland library, which is I could not speak highly enough of. Man, it's just a great experience. But then they're also those same people who made that happen are also making this comics and jazz fest happen, and that's my whole thing, So I'm going to be doing that, and I recommended Dave Chisholm for that very highly as well. The guy that recently did that Miles Davis book.
Yeah,
so beautifully.
I'm really interested in this. I keep me informed if you can.
I will for sure.
I want to know more about this because my life is music and comics and even the political stuff, but it's music.
Yeah, we're going to talk at great length. But I'll keep you informed about that conference.
I appreciate that. We're running low on time.
Here we are.
Is there a screaming question out there?
I think we've hit the crux of most of them, and I appreciate.
Do you have a cool one to end with? Come on.
Let's see. Let me run through real quick. Someone asked me, it's fan discussion, which is the superior rivalry, Thor versus Hulk or Wolverine versus Hulk? I'll say that Wolverine versus Hulk is the cooler one. But I mean, if we're talking practicality, Wolverine can't hang, right? I mean, that's just another level. So I'd say Thor versus Hulk has got to be the more realistic one. That would make for the better fight.
It would be the one that I would like to avoid in traffic.
Exactly. Philip, what do you think makes Krill Ooks different from General Zod as a Superman antagonist? Krill Ooks, he is the kind of the last son of the Philosians, the way he sees it. Now there are other Philosians out there, of course, but Philosians are not quite Kryptonians. Like they have their own culture, and we're going to see that continue to play out. The Philosians, especially with the stories that are coming, we'll see Philosians have their own culture. It's not just their power set. And, where General Zod belongs intrinsically to the Kryptonian race, Krill Ooks believes that the legacy of the Philosians lies firmly on his shoulders alone. So that he identifies with a very different kind of culture. And he still regards Superman as a friend and ally, even though Superman does not regard him the same because of, Krill Ooks' machinations and his, the murders and everything that he did.
Yeah.
He can't accept Krill Ooks as an ally anymore, but he was. And so I don't know, there's this frenemy thing that is closer to the friend side than he ever had with Zod. Anyway.
Well, Zod has issues with Superman's daddy.
Yeah, exactly. Like with Krillux, it's about him and Clark specifically, not so much about the characters who are gone now.
Cool. I think we're way over time, and I enjoy that. I'm very glad. There's like about 8 things we haven't gotten to, which we'll have to do it next time. We hopefully it won't be a year before we get you back.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Yeah.
I want to thank everybody for listening and joining in and giving some great questions. How is there an end on Green Lantern really quick while we're here? Is that
Say it again?
still ongoing? Green Lantern War Journal, do you have an end in sight on that, or is that still ongoing?
I might get in trouble if I reveal it, but there is an end plan. Yes,
There's an end plan. Okay,
yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah, there's an end plan because of what happens after that. Like the book is leading to another thing.
Okay.
I probably shouldn't spoil it, but it's there's an end plan, and that's been planned the whole time. And actually, it got extended once when they brought me onto the book. Thanks, Pluto. Appreciate all the comments. The end that was planned got extended without my knowledge until later. It was only going to be like, it started out as a 6-issue thing, and then they're like, actually, it's going to be longer, and it's going to be longer. So it kind of grew beyond his expectations from the jump. But that's great. The story that we're telling is actually it'll flesh him out much better, and we get to tie it in with the War World stuff and give John a proper Nemesis character, and it worked out for the best for sure.
Great, cool. All right, thank you, Philip, for being here. I'm going to pull you out.
Philip, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, sir. Both of you. Yeah, look forward to the next time.
Yep, absolutely. All right, Mike, we will be back next week. Hopefully, we do not have our guest yet confirmed, but we have a couple of options. So please stay tuned to Pop Culture Squad on all of our social medias or popculturesquad.com. You will find out what's going on. And subscribe to our newsletter so you can know what's happening. Please come back and watch this. Subscribe to this channel that you're watching it. All the things. Your last word.
My last word is to thank everybody out there in the ether for putting up with us for 2 hours and 7.5 minutes. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks, everybody. All right. Thanks, everybody.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?